Unit 4 Our Environment. In this lesson, we learn about the ecosystem and their components, and we'll also understand food chains, about recycling the waste, and the difference between biodegradable and non-biodegradable wastes. We'll also study the different types of pollutions and the impacts on the environment. The surroundings or the place in which a person, an animal, or the plant lives, we call it as the environment. The environment is that everything that surrounds us. We can have both living and non-living things. We celebrate the World Environment Day on 5th June of every year. We classify our environment into living things and non-living things. Biotic and abiotic factors. Abiotic factors are non-living parts such as sunlight, air, water, and minerals in the soil. But the biotic factors are living things of our environment such as plants, animals, bacteria, and other organisms. Ecosystem is a community of living and non-living things that work together. Each part of the ecosystem has a role to play. Any changes in the environment, such as increased temperature or heavy rains, can have a big impact on our ecosystem. The ecosystems can be classified into natural ecosystem and artificial ecosystem. In turn, the natural ecosystem is classified into terrestrial ecosystem and aquatic ecosystem. And the artificial ecosystem is also classified as terrestrial ecosystem and aquatic ecosystem. The components of ecosystem. We have two different components, biotic components and abiotic components. The biotic components include all living organisms like plant, animal, and human beings. Whereas the abiotic components include all non-living components. The abiotic components has two different factors, physical factors and edaphic factors. The physical factors that affect our environment are light, temperature, wind, and humidity. The edaphic factors are soil. We have soil in water, soil in air, and soil in organic matters. Pond is a good example of ecosystem. They have both biotic and abiotic factors, and they have both physical and edaphic factors. Natural ecosystem. The natural ecosystem is the one which is originated without the human intervention. We'll call it as a natural ecosystem. The examples for the natural ecosystems are sea, river, lake, pond, a puddle, and some other water bodies. The artificial ecosystems are created and maintained by the human beings. They have some of the characteristics like the natural ecosystems, but they are much simpler than the natural ecosystems. Examples like paddy fields, gardens, etc. Let us know something new. Aquarium. Aquarium is a place where we place the fish and other water creatures, and the plants are maintained. The shape of the aquarium may be a small tank, a large building with one or more than large tanks. Terrarium is a place where the animals and the plants are kept. The plants and animals are kept in terrarium with a specific conditions that suits the natural environment. Sometimes the aquarium and terrarium are also used for decorations, and they are used to observe animals and plants more closely.
Food chain and food web. Living organisms need food to perform their life process. Some organisms can produce for their own food, while the other organism cannot do this. They have to depend on other organisms to obtain their energy. Food chain. A food chain shows only one path how the energy moves to the ecosystem. That means who will eat the other organisms and how. Food web. The food web shows many paths to how the energy moves through the ecosystem. The same process who eats who. But the food web is made up of many different food chains. Based on the organisms, how they obtain the food, it is classified into producers and consumers. The organisms that make their own food using the sunlight, we call it as producers, while the consumers that eats the producers or other consumers, it means it cannot prepare their own food, we'll call it as consumer. There are 4 types of consumers: herbivorous, carnivorous, omnivorous, and scavengers. Herbivorous. The animals which eat only the plants, they are called as herbivorous. For example, cattle, deer, goat, and rat. Carnivorous. Animals that eat only other animals, they are called as carnivorous. For example, lion, tiger, frog, and owl. Omnivorous. The animals that eat both the plants and animals, they called as omnivorous. For example, humans, dogs, and crow. Let us see an example for a food chain. In a forest, a deer eats grass, and in turn, the tiger eats the deers. In an ecosystem, there is a chain-like relationship between the organisms lives there. The sequence of eating whom in an ecosystem we call it as a food chain. Here, the grass is a producer, the deer and the tigers are consumers. Here is an example for food chain in an aquatic ecosystem. The aquatic ecosystem also have producers and consumers. The first one is the aquatic plant and an aquatic insect. Then it is eaten by a larva. The larva in turn, it is eaten by a fish, and in turn it is eaten by a large animal. So this is a food chain.
Food chain. The sequence of who eats whom in an ecosystem, we'll call it as a food chain. It describes how organisms get energy and nutrition by eating other organisms. A food chain shows the relationship between the producers and the consumers. See that the energy is passed along the producers to the consumers. There are different levels where we call it as trophical level in food chain. Animals that eat plants are called as primary consumers. Animals that eat primary consumers are called as secondary consumers. Animals that eat the secondary consumers are called as tertiary consumers. There may be even large predators that eat tertiary consumers. They are called as quaternary consumers. And each of these levels in the food chains, we call it as trophical level. Organisms uses up to 90% of its food energy for its life processes. Here is an example for food web. The food web crosses from different levels. Waste management and recycling. To protect our environment, it is very important to reduce waste and manage it properly and maximize recycling. Biodegradable waste. The term biodegradable waste is used for the things that can be easily decomposed by the natural agents like water, oxygen, ultraviolet rays of the sun, and microorganisms, etc. Non-biodegradable waste: those materials which cannot be broken down or decomposed into the soil by the microorganisms and the natural agents are labeled as non-biodegradable substances. These substances consist of plastic materials, metal scraps, aluminium cans, and bottles, etc. The solid waste management can be done one of our duty to reduce creating the waste and protect our environment. There are 3 R's which are important in protecting our environment. The first R is reduce, the second R is reuse, and the third R, that is last one, is recycle. The waste management can be assembled from the most favorable to the least favorable. And we have different levels like avoid, reduce, reuse, recycle, compost, incinerate, and the landfill. We should avoid using unwanted materials which create more debris. So before getting any things, we should think that, do I really need it? And if we think about it, we can avoid buying packed foods, which in turn we can refuse buying of the plastic products. Reduce. We can reduce the waste by using the durable goods that last longer instead of one use and throwing it away. For example, we can write both sides of the papers instead of printing and using the electronic facilities. We can also share newspapers, magazines, and other things with the neighbors. We can reuse the things again and again rather than using and throwing it after a single use. Instead of using the plastic bags, we can use cloth bags. Instead of using a ballpoint pen, we can use fountain pen. Instead of using single batteries, we can use rechargeable batteries. We can also reuse glass bottles for other purposes. Recycle, the process by which the waste materials are used to make some new products, are called as recycling. For examples, we can use the old clothes to make paper and the melting materials to make the floor mats and the plastic boards and the hose pipes. Compost, the degradation of the organic waste into manure by the action of microorganisms. This process, we call it as composting. Thus, the manure obtained becomes the natural fertilizer for the plants, as well as it also increases the fertility of the soil. Incinerate. The burning of the solid waste into incinerator, we call it as incineration. The human and non-particle wastes are disposed by means of incineration. During incineration, the enormous heat kills all the contagious diseases causing germs. We can also use them to produce electricity with this help of this heat. The landfill. The landfill is a method in which the wastes are dumped in one place and which is naturally occurring, or the man-made pits which covered with soil. The garbages buried inside the landfills remain here for the long time as they decompose very slowly and become the manure. These places can be converted into parks, gardens, etc. Let us know something new. We can use the solid waste management as creative reuse. The creative reuse or recycling is the process of converting the waste materials or the useless products into a better and the new products. For example, we can use tires into chairs and use PET bottles into pen stands. Let us know something new. How much waste does each person make around the world every day? As an average person in India, each person produces about 0.45 kgs of waste every day. It may be a small amount of waste, but India is about a large population and just imagine how much large waste we all calculate and put into tractors. If we fill the dumps into the tractors, and approximately it will be about 2,800 kilometers long of traffic jam. Just imagine a road all the way from Kanyakumari to New Delhi will be completely blocked into tractors carrying garbages, and there is no space to walk in between. This is how much waste we create in India each day. India produces about 532 million kilos of solid waste every day. Pollution. The pollution occurs when the environment gets contaminated by water, chemicals, and the harmful substances. Any substance that causes the pollution, we call it as the pollutant. It is mainly harmful by the human activities. There are different kinds of pollutions. The four major kinds of pollutions are air pollution, water pollution, land or soil pollution, and noise pollution. Air pollution. Most air pollutions are caused by burning of fossil fuels like petrol, oil, coal, and the natural gases. Air pollution is also caused by burning the solid wastes of plants. The polluted air affects the skin, eyes, and as well as the respiratory system. How we can reduce the air pollution? Yes, we can use the cycle or walk for the short distance instead of using the motor vehicles. We can use the public transport to travel. It can be either a bus or a train. We should not burn the solid waste and can avoid the fireworks. Water pollution. The water pollution occurs when the waste from the factories, houses, and the farms mixes with the water in the rivers, lakes, ponds, and the oceans or even the groundwater. This contaminated water can spread diseases and the chemicals which are not good for our health. There are different sources of water pollutants like sewage from the home, industrial effluents, that is the wastages, the agricultural pollutants like fertilizers and pesticides, and the solid waste which is get dumped into the water bodies. How we can reduce the water pollution? Yes, we should not pour the leftover oils or the waste medicines into the drain or into the toilet. We should reduce using the chemical pesticides and fertilizers to grow crops. Use wastewater for the garden in the home. We should not litter or dump the waste, and we should always use a waste bin. Land pollution. The land pollution is also called as soil pollution when happens the toxic chemicals change the natural balance in the soil. The land pollution comes from farming, mining, and the factories, and the solid waste from our own homes like plastic and broken electronics. If we grow plants to eat in the polluted soils, it is very dangerous chemicals that we get into our food. How we can reduce the land pollution? First, we can use the 3 R's: reduce, reuse, and the recycle. Always we should use the waste bin and we should not litter outside. Litter means we should not throw it outside. We should not also burn the waste and mix the ashes easily with the soil. Noise pollution. The noise pollution affects the environment very easily. We are all a quiet and peaceful place since the unpleasant sound or the loud sounds disturbs us. The noise pollution has been directly linked to stress and health impacts such as high blood pressure and hearing loss. The loud music or the loud sound can also damage our ears. The noise pollution also disturbs the animals. How we can reduce the noise pollution? Yes, we can turn off the electronic gadgets when we not use them. We can lower the volume of our TV or while listening to the music. We should remind the drivers should not use the horn too much. We can also avoid fireworks. We should speak but we should not shout. This is a very good example to reduce the noise pollution.